Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 54th Washington Conference on the Americas. My name is Eric Farnsworth, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity once again to welcome you here to this beautiful, historic location, the Organization of American States here in Washington, D.C. Thank you to the Secretary General, Luis Almagro, and also to U.S. Ambassadors Brian Nichols and Francisco Mora for making this day possible. More importantly, we thank all three of them for their friendship. Ambassadors, senior government officials, representatives, Council of the Americas members, friends, our screens constantly remind us that we live in perilous times. The world seems every day more complicated and unruly. And it's easy to get caught up in the information doom loop. We all do it. Yet if there is one region worldwide free from sectarian violence, rich in human capital and natural resources, favorable toward democratic values, and very much open for business, it's the Western Hemisphere. Like anywhere else, the region faces headwinds and is not immune to political, economic, or occasional social disruption. But for almost 60 years, the Council of the Americas has firmly believed that Latin America and the Caribbean present outsized potential and must therefore be centered in the global governance and economic calculus. And that's why we've chosen our conference title this year, Advancing the Business Case for the Americas, because the opportunities are real. All of you know that, and that's why we're all here. But we need to acknowledge, promote, and contend for them. Our sponsors and members allow us to do just that, providing the support that enables our activities, including making this the most impactful conference each year on the Americas. We are mindful of their support. Our 2024 Washington Conference on the Americas presenting platinum sponsors are Amazon and Chevron. Our gold sponsors are AES, BMW, Chiquita, Freeport-McMoRan, GM, Merck, MetLife, Repsol, Shell, and Walmart. Please give them each an appreciative shout out. Today we'll open our program with remarks by the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, introduced shortly by Council Chairman Emeritus, Ambassador John Negroponte, and we'll conclude with remarks by the President of the Dominican Republic. In between, we'll feature panels and discussions with top officials and experts. Our speakers are absolutely first-rate, and we're so pleased that they and you are here with us to engage. It's going to be a great day, so let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, to offer his own introduction, please join me in welcoming our co-host for the 54th Washington Conference on the Americas, the Assistant Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere, Ambassador Brian Nichols.
Thanks very much, Eric, and good morning to all of you. This is a tremendous pleasure for me to be with you today because the Council of the Americas is the premier private sector organization focused on our hemisphere. The transformational and historic work that this group has done for over half a century is really vital to the vision that we have in the administration. This is the engine for private sector-led growth around our region. And you're hearing from our top leaders. I'm not going to get into too much detail about our focus, but I do want to say that the work that each of you do every day provides the message of hope, the message of prosperity, the message of engagement that's vital for our region. I'm so glad that we're here today having this engagement. This is a region that demands a greater presence from the private sector globally, and you are at the vanguard of that presence. Many of you have worked for decades to provide good-paying jobs, a vision of inclusive leadership and opportunity, which makes a tremendous difference positively for the people of our region. Susan and Eric have done such a fabulous job organizing the event this year and every year, and we're so happy to work with them in the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs. We feel like we are part of the Council of the Americas. We're in constant communication across a whole host of issues, and I want you to know that we are here to support you, to serve you. If there are concerns that you have or things that you want to raise, please do not hesitate to bring them to us. We want to make sure that we are your partner in promoting all of your engagements around the region. So thank you so very much. And I now pass the floor to my former boss, Ambassador John Negroponte.
Good morning. I was just thinking, Brian, if you want to join, the Western Hemisphere Bureau wants to join the Council of the Americas, I'm sure we could find a special price. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our opening conference speaker, the Honorable Linda Thomas-Greenfield, United States Ambassador to the United Nations, or as we say technically up there in New York, permanent representative to the United Nations. It is an extraordinarily positive signal that even in the midst of cascading international uncertainties, the ambassador has joined us this morning. The United Nations is at the vortex of ongoing debates, including Haiti and Venezuela, and her plate is very full. As someone with personal knowledge of the complexity of her position at the United Nations, I can say that she has done a remarkable job under very difficult circumstances. I've certainly been impressed by her steady hand and positive results to date on behalf of the American people. We're delighted that she has agreed to join us today to discuss United States partnership with the Hemisphere. Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield, welcome to the Council of the Americas.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Ambassador Negroponte, for that kind introduction. And thanks also to Eric and Brian, our co-hosts today. As you have heard, Ambassador Negroponte and I have had the distinct honor of representing our country at the United Nations, but I will also say he was my boss as well when you served as Deputy Secretary. At the United Nations, former ambassadors make up a very small fraternity of people that have an idea what it's like to sit behind the placard of the United States at the UN Security Council. And John, like ex-presidents who have their own club, that's something I think we need to start for UN ambassadors, and we can get matching jackets. You have to get a red jacket. And we can trace stories of how we manage that very difficult position. But in all seriousness, thank you, John, for your service to our country, and for all you do to strengthen the ties between the United States and our partners across the Western Hemisphere, which is exactly what we're here to do during the 54th Annual Washington Conference on the Americas. And I want to thank Chairman Gluski, President Siegel, and their teams for bringing us together. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. This room is packed. It's packed to the brim with change makers, including senior government officials and private sector and civil society leaders. Now, so often these conferences, we focus exclusively on the challenges we face. But I want to take a moment to highlight the successes we've had across the Western Hemisphere, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean over the past few decades. Since the 1980s, we have seen a sharp decline in military coups and civil wars, and corrupt leaders have been held to account. Since the 90s, many countries have been able to tame hyperinflation. And since the 2000s, the share of Latin Americans living in poverty has fallen dramatically and is now below pre-pandemic levels. And at a time when we see so much democratic backsliding around the world, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela embrace of full-fledged authoritarianism has failed to present an alluring model for their neighbors, and for good reason. We and our partners throughout the region continue to support the democratic aspirations of these regimes' citizens. And with the help of strong civil societies, we have seen democracies weather attacks. They have weathered the storm, including in Guatemala and Brazil. There's cause for optimism. I've seen that optimism with my own eyes during my travels to Brazil, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guyana, and other Latin American and Caribbean countries. But we also have to be clear-eyed about the challenges of our time, to acknowledge and address instability, particularly in Haiti, where violent gangs have terrorized communities, cut off humanitarian aid, and sowed chaos. As leaders, we must also continue to guard against attacks on fundamental freedoms and human rights, especially toward marginalized groups like Indigenous people and the LGBTQI+ community. And we must do more to ensure economic growth benefits everyone and tackle the existential threat posed by the climate crisis. Clearly, there is a great deal of work ahead of us, work we must take on. We must take it on together, and we must take it on as partners. At the top, let me be frank and address the fact that many leaders openly question the United States' commitment to this work. I hear it every single day in New York. They believe we're only focused on Russia's brutal war of aggression in Ukraine, on conflict in the Middle East, on competition with China. But here's what I want to make clear today on behalf of President Biden. The United States is fully committed to the success of the Western Hemisphere, because when countries across the region succeed, we all succeed, and the United States' economic and national security is stronger. Now, it's one thing to say we're committed, and it's another thing to demonstrate it. And so today, I want to focus on the ways the United States is backing up our words with action. From day one, the United States has worked to strengthen our ties with regional leaders, bilaterally and in multilateral fora. President Biden has met with the majority of presidents and prime ministers in the region. Vice President Harris's first trip was to Guatemala and Mexico, and the Vice President, Secretary Blinken, and members of the cabinet, including myself, have been a constant presence in and with the region. At the UN, I have met with representatives from nearly every country. I know the hemisphere's diplomats well, and I'm constantly going back and forth with them on issues of mutual concern. On the Security Council, I get to work closely with Ecuador and Guyana, and previously with Brazil, Mexico, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Countries in the Americas have always been serious and constructive partners on the Security Council. Guyana and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for example, have teamed up with the African countries on the Council, calling themselves the +1 to the A3. And that means they can carry 4 votes with them, 2 from Latin America and 2 from Africa. In big moments, Guyana is uniquely positioned to help forge consensus. The contributions of countries in the hemisphere have been so important over the years that our administration had made clear that in our vision for UN Security Council reform, there has to be permanent representation for Latin America and the Caribbean on the Security Council. The bottom line is this: across the region and across the multilateral system, we are strengthening our partnerships so that we are better prepared to tackle today's challenges together, like the crisis in Haiti, which I mentioned earlier. One of my first trips as a cabinet member was to Haiti, to President Moïse's funeral. It was brief, and I felt firsthand the insecurity that Haitians live with every single day. At the funeral, shots were fired. I was compelled to cut my trip short and immediately head back to the airport. Ever since, I have thought often about those who cannot just get out. Some people may want to just give up on Haiti. I'm not one of those, because that cannot be the answer, and we cannot turn our backs on the Haitian people. There are so many vulnerable people in Haiti, only a few hours from Miami, that need the support of the international community. And we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to them to help them help themselves. The Biden-Harris administration's approach has produced results. With Haitians in the lead, we're seeing a bit of momentum on the political front. Prime Minister Henry's peaceful resignation, a Haitian-led transition to a new government with a steadfast regional support, and advances in the preparations for the MSS mission. We know much more needs to be done, and I know the challenges in Haiti will outlive my tenure, but I will not stop working on this, and I will not surrender to the cynicism that we hear all the time. Another challenge we collectively face is irregular migration. Over the past 3 years, we have worked to support communities that host large populations of migrants. Just yesterday, while in Guatemala, on behalf of the United States, Secretary Blinken announced $578 million in humanitarian development and economic assistance to support partner countries and host communities in responding to urgent humanitarian needs, expanding lawful pathways, and supporting the regularization and integration of migrants. We're working to empower the most vulnerable so that they can contribute to the local economy and rebuild their lives where they are. And we recognize that countries in the Americas have really stepped up to address the largest refugee crisis outside of a war zone. In turn, we've taken steps to help mitigate the costs that countries have to bear when they welcome their Venezuelan neighbors. At the same time, our administration is working to create legal, humane pathways to migration, to combat transnational criminal organizations that prey on migrants, and to address the root causes of this issue. A root cause of irregular migration, instability and violence, which force people who fear for their lives to leave their homes. And so we must work together to advance peace and security. The security of our neighbors is the security of our entire region. Another root cause of migration, lack of economic opportunity. When people don't have access to jobs, when people can't provide for their families, they have to look elsewhere. And so we also need to work together to create new opportunities through sustainable development and investments that benefit all, not just the wealthy and the powerful. Here, too, the Biden administration is mobilizing significant resources. Through the Americas Partnership, we're launching a new investment platform to channel billions of dollars in financing for sustainable infrastructure and to steer investments to hundreds of up-and-coming entrepreneurs, including in the clean air sector. The threat posed by the climate crisis also presents an opportunity to create high-quality, good-paying, clean energy jobs. And we have to seize on that opportunity. That also means making reforms in international development banks, something that our administration is committed to so that we can unlock financing at cheaper rates. Another key piece of this puzzle, public and private sector partnerships, because as Secretary Blinken has said, and I quote, "Delivering growth with equity demands tapping into one of the most powerful engines for opportunity in the Americas, the private sector," unquote. U.S. trade with countries in the region total $1.5 trillion a year, far more than any other country in the world, and we're proud to invest in a way that aligns with the region's values, in a way that's open and transparent, in a way that respects labor and human rights, in a way that is environmentally conscientious, and that doesn't pile debt on countries, especially the region's middle-income economies. And we promote economic prosperity. As we promote economic prosperity, we must also promote democracy, because the two are linked. Let's be honest, some of us share a different view on this. Some believe that economic growth trumps civil and political rights. And autocrats are making the case that cracking down on freedom of speech, assembly, and press is unacceptable as long as there is economic development. But the United States has a fundamentally different view of the case. We know that when societies have fundamental rights, everyone, and especially minorities and vulnerable populations, are more secure and prosperous. We know that when countries put an emphasis on political rights, when they root out corruption and strengthen the rule of law, international investors gain confidence and businesses can thrive. And so as we work to expand economic growth for all our citizens, we must continue to protect and strengthen our democracies. After all, one of the key reasons our partnerships are so strong is because we share democratic values. We share a commitment to civil liberties, to equal rights. Another thing that brings us together are people-to-people ties, and that's what I want to close with, because this is the foundation of our partnership, of our shared success. The United States is a country of immigrants, and more than 63 million Latinos and millions more with roots in Canada and the Caribbean live in the United States, contributing to every part of our society, adding to the rich fabric of our nation. These people have strong and lasting ties to countries across the region. They have families they go back and visit, and traditions and cultures they uphold. They're deeply invested in the future of the countries where they have roots. They want to see peace and security in the region, and they want to see strong economies and democracies. They want to see us come together to take on the challenges of our time. And they're not just sitting back and hoping that we act. People across the hemisphere, including young students, entrepreneurs, civil society groups, are stepping up to lead. And I know this because I've met with these groups. I've met with the young people during my travels in New York and at the Summit of the Americas and the Cities Summit. With these grassroots leaders at the fore, I'm incredibly hopeful and optimistic about the future of our region, a future that is more secure, more prosperous, and more democratic for all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and thank you for your continued partnership.